And Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. I'm Chris Perugine, joined today by Julian Bonici, and today is a special episode where we'll also, at the end of the program, have an interview with Matthew Caruana Galizia to talk about yesterday's events. So I'll just run through the headlines and we'll start talking about the first 5 stories of the day. An 84-year-old has just become Malta's 25th COVID-19 death. We've had 10 deaths in the past 10 days. Schembri, the former chief of staff of the former Prime Minister Joseph Muscat, is out on police bail after being arrested early yesterday morning. 2 British teens who were caught bus surfing have sparked Malta's ire. We'll talk a bit about what happened over there. 4 men arrested over Floriana beatings and a spate of robberies. And a second batch of assets of Schembri have been frozen overnight. So, Julian, can we start with the first story, a tragic story about yet another COVID death?
Yes, some very tragic news this morning. The health authorities have announced that an 84-year-old man has become Malta's 25th COVID-19 related fatality. Very, very, very tragic news after another person also died yesterday. That person was 86 years old. It continues on just a run of fatalities in Malta. This is the 10th COVID-related fatality in 10 days. Very worrying figures, and it seems nothing's stopping this increase. The number of deaths is also quite worrying in the context that the number of cases in elderly homes continue to grow. Yesterday, 15 more cases were confirmed in Dar San Giuseppe in Vgura. Very worrying numbers. Just as an overall breakdown of the figures, there were 38 new cases announced yesterday and 34 recoveries, bringing up the total number of active cases to 678. Now that's really, really quite high, and I'm just wondering if there's a bit of fatigue from authorities and the public, given that it's been almost 7 months since the pandemic hit Malta.
Yeah, and I think the fatigue point is right. I think that's happening worldwide. I think people are almost tired of hearing about COVID, and so we're desensitized to some of the numbers. But as we're seeing, the numbers in Malta are now at a level that is very concerning, particularly when we know that there's this whole debate about schools reopening very, very shortly. So we'll wait to hear from the authorities about any more measures that are taken. We'll move on to the next story, big story from yesterday, where Schembri, the former chief of staff of Joseph Muscat, was arrested early yesterday morning at about 1 a.m. And then he was released some 20 hours later at 9 p.m. There was very little information coming out from the police's end. Yesterday they refused to answer any journalist questions, and they insisted that this investigation was secretive. This came as Schembri's assets and assets of over 100 people and companies were frozen. The whole case that was investigated yesterday was about the alleged kickbacks that Brian Tonna, Nexia BT, financial advisor of Schembri, gave to Schembri, allegedly in the context of 3 passports sold to Russian individuals. What was interesting yesterday is that the lawyers of Schembri refused to participate in the interrogation. They were claiming a human rights breach, and they also said that the conclusions of the magisterial inquiry into this alleged kickbacks investigation should have been given to their client. The Times of Malta yesterday reported that these have now been given to the client, to the lawyers, so we'll wait to see what happens today. This is the second time Schembri has been arrested. Last December he was released quickly due to lack of evidence, and he was arrested in the context of the murder of Matthew Caruana Galizia. This time he was arrested and released on police bail. So we'll keep following this story and we'll discuss it a bit more at length with Matthew Caruana Galizia at the end of the show. Shall we move on to the next story?
Yeah, onto the third story. So a video of a pair of teens bus surfing through Hamrun got quite a furious reaction around Malta. People were commenting. I even think an official investigation was open. Quite a lot of criticism directed to the bus company themselves, you know, for allowing this to happen. But now it seems just a quick look on social media feeds that this is just, you know, just the tip of the iceberg. So one guy called Nuisance69 on TikTok basically shares videos breaking all kinds of rules, scaling dizzying heights. Quite scary for someone like me. In Malta, he was even sleeping on hammocks outside office spaces for a laugh, you know. Now he's uploaded his videos of actually going on the bus. You know, he's on the bus stop near Bombay, and his friend just quickly climbs on. Bit of video about it. Quite, I mean, light-hearted, I suppose, but people are quite angry about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the bus company at first was given quite a lot of criticism for sort of allowing this to take place, but in reality this happened without them noticing. The video is quite impressive how they sort of scaled the bus from the top of a bus stop, and I think this is yet another example of social media sort of triggering this kind of behavior, right? Doing crazy things for likes and stuff like that. This is the world we live in today. We'll move on to the next story. Yesterday, 4 men were arrested, 3 of them homeless men, over the Floriana beatings and robberies of several people. So we had someone from the USA arrested, someone from Indonesia arrested, someone from Zimbabwe, and a Libyan man who lives in Zurich. The other 3 were homeless. They were arrested in connection with a number of beatings and muggings in Floriana, the one of which was actually filmed, not the beating itself, but Emmanuel Zamid, the victim of that mugging, actually spoke on camera with his bloodied face a couple of days ago. The video went viral online and seems to have sparked these arrests. So we'll see what happens on this case moving forward. And our last story...
Yeah, is basically back to Keith Schembri. So while he's under police bail, it does seem that another batch of his assets has been frozen by court order. So for those of you who don't remember, about on Monday, 21st September, a court order was leaked with a list of over 100 companies, relatives, you know, a long list of people linked to Keith Schembri and Brian Tonna. This even included, you know, some babies, some born in 2020, some who were barely 2 years old. However, people like Keith Schembri's daughter were noticeably absent from the document itself. It seems this is going to change soon. Matthew Caruana Galizia, I guess, who's coming soon, was the first one to reveal this information. We'll hear more about it after this video.
Dr. Gatt, what's the situation with regard to the case? Has your client been questioned? Has an interrogation?
No, basically we are insisting the police tell us what the conclusions of the magistrate who just concluded the inquiry were, as to whether it was true or not that there were kickbacks. We are insisting that the truth is made public, and we are also insisting with the police that they disclose what the conclusions of the magistrate were. Before these conclusions are made public, we are not going to participate in the interrogation process.
Is your client still insisting that these 50,000 and another 50,000 were related to a loan repayment?
At the moment, my client testified within the acts of the inquiry. From now on, what is important is no longer what my client said. From now on, what is important are the conclusions.
So there we had the lawyers of Keith Schembri, Edward Gatt and Mark Vassallo talking to the press yesterday outside the police headquarters, claiming that, saying that they're not going to participate in the police interrogation until they have a full disclosure of the magistrate inquiry into this alleged kickbacks. Matthew Caruana Galizia, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. I think my first question is, Keith Schembri was arrested yesterday for the second time, released on police bail after 20 hours. What do you make of this? What's your reaction to what happened yesterday? Does it make you hopeful, or do you think this is some kind of smokescreen or farce?
I'm always hopeful, and to me these are just necessary steps It's like the country has a recipe for justice that we're presenting, and this is one of the steps in the method to get the end result. So, of course, I'm happy that this has happened, but there are certain things about the process that just send, I guess, a bad signal or give a bad impression. The fact that a few companies were left out, the police don't seem to have been prepared, because if there was proper preparation, he could have been arraigned immediately. There was no need to release him on bail and so on. So that's a sign that there was some lack of preparation, which doesn't make sense, because supposedly the police have been working on this investigation for over 4 years. So we're left wondering what's been happening in the meantime. And the only conclusion is absolutely nothing on the police side. It's true that the magistrate has produced this report, but a magisterial inquest isn't supposed to substitute a police investigation. That's not the way things should work. That only happens in an emergency situation where the police are absolutely not doing their job. They're supposed to work in parallel. That's how things are supposed to happen.
But so just to clarify, because you're saying that they were unprepared, but they've had all this time to work on, you're hopeful, but am I to understand that the changes that have happened in the police force over the past months has resulted in action taking place, but that means the action is rushed? So you see like an element of good faith in the investigation that's being done now, but rather than being a 4-year investigation, it's becoming a 4-month investigation. Is that how you're seeing it?
I have absolutely no doubt that the current head of the Economic Crimes Unit, Alexandra Mammo, is not 1,000, 1,000,000 times better than Ian Abdullah, who was in a seemingly corrupt relationship with Jürgen Fenech and Keith Schembri. So we went from a terrible situation to one which is much better. It was inconceivable that Ian Abdullah or Lawrence Kutayar would have prosecuted Keith Schembri. But of course, now that these people have been removed, it became possible. This is why, literally the day after my mother's murder, we called for the resignation of the police commissioner, the attorney general, the prime minister, because we knew that these people were like brick walls in the way of justice. They had to be removed so that we could eventually get there.
So obviously Keith Schembri has allegedly been handed the inquiry's conclusions. Doesn't make it more imperative that these conclusions are made public as soon as possible?
I mean, ideally, the police would make public statements explaining what they're doing, what the charges are, why this case is important, and so on. But they're not doing that. This is a real problem within the police force, a simple lack of communication. Of course, they can communicate to the public what the charge. First of all, there have to be charges, but then they can communicate to the public what those charges are. This is obvious. It's what happens everywhere. There's secrecy is important at some points in the investigation, but there comes a point when a complete secrecy begins to work against everyone, work against justice.
What about Nexia BT? Our understanding is that Bryantton and Carl Cheney are under arrest and haven't been released on bail. What's your analysis of that?
It's about time. I mean, it's about time. Come on, is this what had to be done? I mean, now 4.5 years later, it should have happened the day the Panama Papers were published. Instead, the police did nothing, participated in a cover-up with the complicity of the Attorney General and the Prime Minister's office. My mother was murdered as a result. And now, 3 years after the murder, finally they're being arrested. This is absolutely ridiculous. And people should be a lot more angry about this. This company, Nexia BT, isn't just a problem for Malta, it's a problem for all of Europe. I think when we begin to fully unravel what they've done, will realize the full extent of their criminality. And it's going to be a lot worse than we ever imagined.
So obviously on the court order freezing so many people's assets, so many people were named into Nexia BT, we saw people born in 2020, we saw 2-year-olds, we saw 3-year-olds, but then we saw Schembri's daughter missing from the list. We also saw Nexia BT hive off some of its assets to another company. Does this at all concern you? Were they pre-warned about it, about what was going to happen?
Of course it's concerning. First of all, Nexia BT have had, like I said, 4.5 years to prepare for this. Can you imagine what they've done in the meantime? This is the cost of things dragging on. And eventually the defendants are left to say there's no evidence against us, because obviously they've been given time to destroy most of that evidence. It will only be through sheer luck and serendipity that we discover the evidence that will eventually put them in jail.
Matt, first of all, thank you so much for your courage and your determination, your clarity of thought in these 3 years. One of the points of your campaign is, and even the public inquiry, is to show that your mother's murder could have been avoided. Explain that to us in the context of yesterday's investigation. So we have a situation where an inquiry was called back in 2016 in the election campaign of 2017. Nothing happens, and then the murder takes place. So could your mother's death have been avoided if action was taken before? And could that action have been taken, given that these investigations take so long and are so difficult and complicated sometimes?
The investigations become more difficult and complicated the more time you allow to pass, because you're allowing time to criminal organizations to cover up and destroy evidence and work on their stories and so on. Absolutely, without a doubt, my mother's murder could have been avoided had action been taken in 2016. Instead, what happened? The police and the Attorney General participated in a cover-up with the blessing or on the encouragement of the Prime Minister. No serious investigations ever took place. When I opened the file of the police investigation called Operation Green that we got access to through the public inquiry, it was more shocking than I imagined. Like I say, it's always more shocking than you ever imagine, because they did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. For 4 years, nothing. It's shocking.
And you said earlier that people should be angrier. We're talking in the beginning of the program about COVID fatigue and how months into the pandemic things have almost relaxed. Do you think the same can be said for justice for your mother? Is there a fatigue? Should people be in the streets today like they were in December? What should the public's reaction be right now? Or should we be content or almost optimistic or hopeful that actually a number of the people that you said were barriers to justice have been removed and replaced by people who seem more competent to do these things?
I don't think I need to say what the public reaction should be, because I'm quite sure that the public feeling is one of absolute shock and disgust at how low we've sunk, buried into the ground. But I can certainly say what I think the reaction of, for example, the government or members of the governing party should be. It should be one of equal shock and disgust, one where they condemn what the party has become, what the government has become. But they're not doing this. Look at every single one of them, every single MP, every single member of cabinet. Not a single squeak from them. They have absolutely nothing to say about this. It's unacceptable.
In fact, yesterday the Prime Minister said that just because 1 or 2 people did something wrong doesn't mean that the electoral gas deal or the pass was
That's complete rubbish. What happened was, if you look at the timeline of the way events unfolded, The Labour Party was taken over by a criminal organisation led by Schembri. When the Labour Party got into government, it took that criminal organisation into government with it. And then it turned the government into a criminal organisation that controlled every single authority, every single branch of government. So it's not a question of one bad person. The whole organisation is corrupted, and now we need a process where all that poisoned blood is let out of the system. And it can't happen for as long as these people are still there. Robert Abela, Edward Cicluna, all of these people who oversaw this corruption and did absolutely nothing about it. It's not a case of one bad person. Robert Abela is, of course, trying to defend himself personally. But the job of the Prime Minister is not to defend yourself personally, it's to defend the interests of justice, the interests of the public, the interests of the country. He's not doing that. He's only looking after himself, looking after his political party, but that's not what Prime Ministers are there to do.
What's the next step, Matt? What are you expecting to happen today or in the days and weeks to come?
This entire criminal organisation has to be prosecuted. There have to be prosecutions of Jürgen Fenech for bribery, Schembri for bribery, all of the other people who formed a part of the system, Nexia BT, the people who worked within it, people within banks. The entire system has to be expunged from our government. It's the only way to move forward.
And do you think setting a time limit on the public inquiry is just all of an extension of this, trying to prevent the course of justice taking place?
100%. Robert Abela is obviously afraid of the public inquiry. He's afraid for himself personally, afraid for his political party. These are people who have absolutely no way of working in the private domain. They sort of depend on sucking up resources from public funds. So the moment they're out of that, that's it. Their careers, their professional lives are over. They completely depend on this. So it's unsurprising that he's taking this approach. But I mean, more than that, what people tend to forget, I think, is that the sort of war in the heavens that's being waged here in Malta is about these multi-billion-dollar deals, electrogas, the hospitals, the passports. It's really about that. So, of course, there are all these people, mostly men, who are sort of trying to, they're working for their own ego, for egotistical reasons. But also behind that, there are these multi-billion-dollar deals that a lot of vested interests want to protect. And pressure from behind the scenes, from people whom you don't see publicly, is being put on people like Robert Abela to protect these deals, to make sure that they aren't torn up.
Our last question, because I know we've taken a lot of time, but as we know, the public is watching and very interested in what you have to say. What do you make of the information coming out by that blogger Kenneth Rejock that the FBI is seriously interested in what's happening in Malta, is on the ground in Malta, investigating people, including Joseph Muscat, and that even yesterday's arrest, that doesn't change that at all from their perspective?
It's obvious that the FBI are interested. I mean, of course they're interested in what's going on. What serious police force wouldn't be interested?
Because there is this international scale to it, no? As you were saying before.
Yes, of course. I mean, we still haven't even begun to uncover what Schembri was really up to in Libya, for example, or what Jürgen Fenech and Schembri were up to with Italian organized crime. We haven't even begun to unravel that. Yeah. We're just beginning.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thanks again, as I said, for your determination these past 3 years, because it's given, I think, a lot of people hope. And it's also, things like ensuring that there is a public inquiry has helped change that narrative from people who thought, this murder should just be swept under the rug to this is actually on the scale that you're talking about, and the country needs to reckon with it properly.
Of course. If anyone in this country has any sense of dignity, they would support the public inquiry. and support that it would go on for as long as need be, so that we can eventually say, okay, we have justice, now we can begin rebuilding our country.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I've been Chris Pergin and Julian Bonnici on Lovin Daily. Join us again tomorrow for another episode.